Welcome to Late Night Story. When the world goes silent and shadows stretch longer, some stories awaken, whispered only to those still awake. So put on your headphones, turn down the lights, and let me guide you through the quiet hours. If you're listening alone, you're exactly where you need to be. If everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world, don't forget to subscribe before you drift too far into the dark.
Story 1. I went to the ER last night. Something in there wasn't human. I'm just waiting for a room, my wife said. We were in the lobby next to the security guard station. There were only a handful of patients left. Thank God, I thought. Maybe they'll see us soon. When we had gone to the ER that morning, the nurse had told us, if she doesn't pee in 8 hours, come back and get a new catheter. Well, it had been 9 hours since my wife's last urination. We needed help. I'm going to explode, my wife groaned, holding her abdomen. They'll see us soon. I lied, squeezing her wrist. A frightened wail sounded at our feet. It was Macy, our newborn, squirming in her car seat. Next to us sat a bald, sickly woman. She had a blood-stained bandage on her scalp and a bone-thin frame. It must be cancer, I thought. I gave her a polite smile. It was then I noticed a strange man settled beside her. He was tall and pale and wore faded clothes. It was hard to tell from my angle, but it seemed like his face was... Honey, my wife tapped my shoulder. Can you ask when our room will be open? Yes. I got up and searched for a nurse, but each one was busy or disappearing into various rooms. We're doing the best we can. An EMT told me in passing. I returned to my wife. Just a few more minutes. Another lie. As I sank in my seat, I glanced back to the bald woman. The man who had been sitting next to her was gone. 40 minutes later, an EMT burst into the lobby, pushing a wheelchair. A room just opened up. Get her in. By now my wife was spasming. Drool dribbled from her lips. I helped the EMT transfer her into the wheelchair, then hoisted Macy along as we rushed through the double doors and found an empty room. Get her on the bed, a nurse commanded, rushing in with a bladder scanner. I watched as they lifted my wife onto the cot. I was terrified, but grateful she was finally being seen. As I watched, a gurgling noise grew behind me. I turned. Something pale and sickly darted from the doorway. I stepped out and peered down the corridor. There was nothing there. After my wife stabilized, I handed over Macy to be breastfed. Then I ducked out to relieve my own bladder. As I made my way toward the restroom, a depressing sob drifted into my ears. Please help. It was coming from a room just ahead. Oh, God, it hurts. The voice was so desperate, so pleading. I wasn't a doctor, but I could at least alert the nurses. If needed, I dashed toward the open doorway and noticed a frail woman, maybe 70 years old, lying in bed. Her shirt was pulled up to expose her stomach, and something was in bed with her. It was the pale man from the lobby, but now his clothes were gone. His skin was so thin and sickly it looked barely stretched over his bones. His hands were on her stomach, like he was searching for something. I was so confused and horrified. My voice shook as I spoke. Excuse me. The pallid man looked up. His face had 2 coal black eyes, an undeveloped skeleton-like nose, and a bizarre wet grin. I spun on my heel and ran. My wife relaxed visibly when I got back. The new catheter was working. Macy was asleep, resting in her mother's arms. My goodness, Todd, you look like you've seen a ghost. I do? I'm just tired. I made my way toward my wife, so mortified that I fell down against the side of the bed, sobbing. It's going to be okay, she said, caressing the back of my neck. I prayed while the nurse was helping me. You did? Yes. I felt this dark presence following me, but it shifted right after the new catheter was put in. Does that sound strange? No, not at all. The sound of footsteps alerted me to the door. The pale man was watching us. His worm-like lips turned into a disturbing frown. What on earth is that? My wife asked. I don't know. The macabre figure emitted a world-weary sigh, slumped his shoulders, and slinked back into the hall. Story 2. I didn't think the scariest part of my little sister going missing would be when I found her, alive and well. You'll have to forgive any errors. Most of this I've written via voice to text on my notes app. I couldn't bring myself to maintain a real relationship with my younger sister, Star, until last year, when she was 21 and I was 29. Part of that was our age gap. Growing up, she could never understand my yearning for our mother, whom Star had barely any memories of before her death. But I also think she blamed me for leaving when she was 12 as I moved out of home with a friend and left her to manage our father, a man who'd started slowly pickling himself via whiskey in the years prior. He was never abusive or evil. I wouldn't do that to her. He just wasn't present. I imagined that was hard for her. Star's my adult relationship mostly centers on hiking. We go hiking on the flats every Sunday. It's a tourist trail over a rural crest with views of a long-abandoned pasture farm in the east and nice views at sunrise. It was 2 Saturdays ago I called her to let her down and told her I'd accompany my husband to his appointment the next morning rather than go on the hike with her. To my surprise, Star planned to complete the hike alone. This would be the first time either of us did it alone, but it's a short trail designed for out-of-towners to complete in half an hour. She didn't come back. I tried calling Star every hour between 2 p.m. and midnight, that's Sunday, before eventually calling the police. My husband and I stood at the entrance of the trail, while police officers and scent dogs trawl the hike until sunrise. By noon, our suburb was plastered with missing posters for Star. A nice young officer had let me detail the poster, choosing everything, the font style, the word size. I picked a photo from her Instagram, uploaded a few months ago. It's a nice photo and she's smiling, but just like in real life, there's something inscrutable about Star's smile. It's friendly, yes, but she seems full of secrets. It took a week of no real news for me to try walking the trail myself to find her Saturday this morning. I didn't tell anyone, not even my husband. I sensed he'd talk me out of it. The trail starts at a dirt path with woods on both sides. It doesn't open up to views for a little while. I don't know what I thought I'd find that police and the dogs had missed. It was why I didn't initially get too excited when I came across a tear of fabric stuck on an exposed branch, waist height. I ran the fabric between my fingers. It was nice fabric, purple, about 6 inches long, as if torn from a woman's old-fashioned dinner gown. I decided to take a turn off the path at this point, like I was following a treasure trail. The space with the branch led down an unofficial pathway toward a cliffside. The trees thinned the further I went, and I had to duck under hanging branches slick with last night's rain. The path ended at a limestone mouth in the rock face. A cavern, shallow at first glance, just a cool pocket in the stone, but something about it made my skin prickle. I stepped closer and pressed my palms to the wall. The stone was not cold. It was warm, faintly pulsing. I had the unmistakable sense that it was breathing with me, rising and falling in rhythm. I jerked my hands back. That was when I heard the crunch of boots on leaves. A deep voice called from behind me, trying to get my attention. I turned to see a man in his late 30s, standing at the edge of the path. He held a leash in one hand, a dark shepherd dog sitting patiently at his heel. The man was clean-shaven, his hair cut short, his clothing oddly old-fashioned for a hiker. Work shirt tucked into belted trousers, shoes polished though dusted with trail dirt. He said I looked pale, and that if I followed him, I could get some water at his farmhouse and have a rest. Everything about him, the calm, directive tone, the patient dog, the fact that the nearest farm is long abandoned, told me I should be wary. And yet, I followed. We walked for what felt like too long to still be within park limits, until the woods opened onto a property I recognized and didn't. The disused farm I'd seen from the trail was no ruin now. The pastures were green, the house whitewashed and neat, smoke curling from a brick chimney. A woman came out onto the porch to greet us, and immediately my knees buckled. It was Star, only she wasn't Star. Her hair was set in curls, a dowdy skirt to her shins. She was wearing a pale apron like she just stepped out an old magazine ad. The man I thought had kidnapped her, dressed her up like some 1960s housewife. But she smiled, welcoming the man back, under no clear duress. To me, she was polite but unfamiliar, as if I were a pleasantly unexpected guest. The man explained it all, how he found me, how he thought I needed a rest. I said her name, Star, but she only tilted her head, polite blank. She led me into the farmhouse, past a kitchen warm with bread smells, past ticking clocks and wallpaper patterns I remember from my grandmother's house. The man offered me tea. I accepted, my mind buzzing, half convinced I'd fainted back at the cavern, and this was some final lucid dream before dying. When they offered me a guest room for the night, I said yes. I had to be close to her, whatever she was right now. When the man retired to bed soon after, Star helped me make up the guest room. Her movements were unhurried, domestic. At one point, she looked at me and I swore she recognized me. I wanted to shake her. I was ready for her to actually acknowledge me, her sister, to tell me she'd been kidnapped. But instead, she simply asked if I ever read Reader's Digest. I shook my head, confused. She explained an article she'd read last week about atoms, how everyone we know is made of atoms, and quarks, and that the first she thought when she read this was the idea of taking these millions of discrete things that make a person, pulling them apart, and reassembling them somewhere or someplace else. She said this like she was making conversation with a stranger. She laughed softly, then, like it was a charming, impossible idea, she wished me good night. I lay awake for hours. The house creaked around me and settled. I opened my eyes to the faint light of dusk. The air had changed, heavy with dust. The wallpaper hung in curled strips. The bed frame was the same, but rusted. Downstairs, the house was silent, empty except for the man's dog, sitting patiently by the door. When I opened it, the dog padded out into the pale dawn, glancing back to make sure I followed. I did. It led me back through the trees until we were at the trailhead again. The sun was just cresting the ridge, and there, jogging up in the parking lot, ponytail swinging, was Star, dressed in her usual workout gear, smiling that inscrutable smile. She asked me if I was ready for our hike, like it was any other Sunday. I followed her into the trail, let her lead, still digesting everything. She stopped to take sips of water from her Stanley cup and tell me things about her life, a recent Bumble date. This time around, I can't even find the trail to the cavern I had gone down just yesterday, and I don't tell her anything about it. When we finished, we ended up back in the trail parking lot. She farewelled me with a hug and says she might call after college classes on Wednesday. I drove straight to the precinct where the lead detective I'd been talking to works out of. The receptionist asked me to wait, so I walk out to sit in my car and get all my thoughts down in one place, get the story straight. I walked past a telephone pole in the lot, one of the first ones I'd affixed a missing poster to when I left the station last week. The missing poster is still there, but I froze. I walked up to it, real close. Star's picture is gone, replaced by a photo of a young woman of a similar age, doing a similar pose. The exact same font and wording, down to the size and spacing, is below it. Went missing on the Flats Trail on Saturday. Please contact police if cited. But it's not Star, the name is Helen. I raced to the next lot over, an ice cream shop next to the precinct, where my husband had started putting posters up. On the wall next to the door, Helen's face encased in a missing poster stares back at me. I wonder if someone out there is looking at a poster of me. I return to my car, which is where I am now, talking into my phone, just parked in the precinct lot, unsure what to do. I know if I go into my call log, I'll see the unanswered hourly panic calls I made to start 2 weeks ago, but they're meaningless. Star's just texted me a photo of the pile of dishes her roommate hasn't washed that she saw upon arriving home. I thought it would help to describe where it all started, but sometimes you can't tell where it starts and ends. Story 3. We found a cave on my grandmother's property. What's inside needs to stay hidden forever. I was 17 the summer we found a cave on my grandmother's property in eastern Kentucky. I have never told this story to anyone. Not my wife. Not a therapist. Nobody. Sealing the cave after Grandma Edith passed should have helped, but it did not. What Chester and I saw down there has never let go of me. I was what you'd call a nerdy kid back then. Thick glasses, skinny as a rail, the type who spent lunch periods in a library. Every summer my parents shipped me off to Grandma Edith's farmhouse in the foothills of the Appalachians, figuring the mountain air would be good for me. The house was everything a city kid like me thought was cool about the country. High ceilings, creaky wooden floors, wraparound porches, and dense forest in every direction. The nearest neighbor was Chester's family, and their place was nearly a mile down the dirt road. Past that, nothing but trees and hollers until you reached the county highway. Chester was a year younger than me, and he was everything I wasn't. He could fix engines, hunt, fish, and navigate the woods like he'd been born to it. Where I was pale and awkward, Chester was sun-darkened and confident. Where I worried about everything, Chester just did things. We become friends the summer before, mostly because we were the only kids for miles, and boredom breaks down barriers. He taught me to shoot his BB gun, and which berries were safe to eat. I helped him with his summer reading, and showed him how to use his family's ancient computer. "John, you worry too much," he'd say when I hesitated at creek crossings or complained about spider webs. "It's just the woods. Ain't nothing out here gonna hurt you." I wanted to believe him. Chester made the forest feel like his backyard, and his confidence was infectious. Around him, I felt braver than I actually was. That summer, we were both restless in the way teenagers get when the days are long and the possibilities seem endless. We'd already built a rope swing over creek, explored every deer trail, even tried to build a tree house that collapsed before we got the roof on. We needed something new, something bigger. We just had no idea what we were about to find. We found in the third week of July, during a brutal heat wave that made the air shimmer and even drove the birds into shade. Chester and I were wandering the property, desperate for something to break the monotony. "Man, there's got to be something we ain't explored yet," Chester said, wiping sweat from his forehead. We were on the ridge at the back of Grandma's land, where the trees were thick and the underbrush hadn't been touched in decades. "Maybe the creek again," I suggested, though we'd been there twice already that week. "Nah, that's boring. We need something new." Chester stopped and pointed. "What's that?" I squinted. Through the foliage, I saw a darker shadow, something that didn't fit the natural pattern of trunks and branches. I squinted where he was pointing. Through the dense foliage, I could make out what looked like a darker shadow among the trees, something that didn't quite fit the natural pattern of trunks and branches. We shoved through brush, scratched by thorns and wrapped in spider webs. Chester led the way, while I followed and complained about the bugs. "Quit whining," he called. "You want to find something cool or not?" In the hillside, we found a depression about 15 feet across, and at its center mouth of a cave, half covered by a rusted iron grate. Time and weather had rusted most of the way, leaving gaps just big enough for nosy teenagers to squeeze through. "Holy crap," Chester breathed, the first time I'd ever heard him sound impressed. "John, look at this." I crept closer. The opening vanished into blackness. A cool breeze drifting out with a smell of damp earth and something I couldn't place. "Think it's an old mine?" I asked. Chester shook his head. "Nah, wrong kind of rock. Limestone country. It's a cave, a real cave." He was already kneeling at the gap, peering into the dark. "We should tell my grandmother," I said. "She'd just tell us to stay away." He grinned, the kind of grin that meant trouble. "Come on, just a quick look. We don't have lights." "My phone does." I wanted to argue, but Chester was already squeezing through the gap. His movement echoed strangely inside. "Chester, wait up," I called. Being alone outside seemed worse than following. Just for a minute, his voice came back, muffled and strange, just to see what's here. I slipped through after him, scraping my shoulder on the rusted metal. The passage opened immediately into a chamber 10 feet high and twice as wide. Chester's phone light swept over smooth limestone carved by water through the ages. "This is so cool," Chester whispered, and his voice echoed back at us from deeper in the cave. The floor was mostly level, covered with a layer of dirt and small rocks that crunched under our feet. Chester played his light ahead, revealing that the cave continued back into hillside much further than either of us had expected. "Okay, we look," I said. "Now let's go back and get real flashlights if we want to explore." But Chester was already moving deeper, his phone light bobbing as he walked. "Chester, just a little further," he called back. "I want to see how far it goes." I followed. The alternative was standing alone in the cave mouth, and that wasn't happening. We made it 50 feet before Chester's phone died. The darkness swallowed us whole, the kind you never get in the city. I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. "Chester?" My voice sounded small. "Right here. Don't panic." His hand grabbed my arm. "Stay close. We'll follow the wall back." We shuffled for 5 minutes along the wall, trying not to trip. When daylight finally appeared, we were both shaking, though neither admitted it. "That was awesome," Chester said, though I heard the relief in his voice. "It goes back really far," I said. "Yeah, we need real lights and rope. Explore it properly." I nodded, though something about the cave felt wrong. Maybe it was the darkness or the way our voices echoed. "Tomorrow," Chester said, "we'll come back with supplies." As we walked back through the woods toward the house, I kept looking over my shoulder at the cave mouth behind us. Even with the afternoon sun filtering through the trees, that dark opening seemed to pull at my attention. I should have listened to that feeling, should have told Grandma Edith, or just found something else to occupy our time that summer. But I was 17, and Chester made everything seem like an adventure, even the things that should have scared us away. We came back the next morning loaded like explorers. Chester had his dad's heavy flashlight, a coil of rope, and glow sticks from his birthday. I brought a headlamp, extra batteries, chalk for marking our path, and a notebook to map it. "You sure like to be prepared," Chester said at the cave entrance. "Better than getting lost." He was already squeezing through the gap. "We won't get lost. We got lights this time." With real light, the cave felt different. What had seemed mysterious in the dim glow of Chester's phone now looked like a normal limestone cavern. Water had carved smooth channels into walls, and the floor sloped gently down as we moved deeper. "This is way bigger than I thought," Chester said, sweeping his light around. Several passages branched off, each fading into darkness. We spent an hour exploring the obvious routes, marking chalk arrows and dropping glow sticks. Chester sketched a rough map, while I called out measurements. "Left passage goes about 60 feet, and dead ends," I said. "Right passage curves back and connects with the center. Like a loop, the center passage drew us in. It ran straight back, sloping steadily down, and our lights couldn't find the end." "That's where we need to go," Chester said, his voice excited. 2 hours in, he made the observation that should have sent us back. "You notice anything weird about this place?" he asked, studying the walls. "What do you mean? What do you mean?" "No bats. No bugs. Nothing." His light swept the ceiling and walls. "Every cave should have bats at least. Spiders, crickets, something. But look, nothing." I stopped and looked. He was right. The place was sterile. No cobwebs, no droppings, no life. Even the puddles were clear and still, with none of the algae you'd expect. "Maybe it's too far from the entrance?" I said. Chester shook his head. "Nah, caves are ecosystems. There should be something living here." We kept going. We were too caught up in the adventure to let a little oddity stop us. The cave was giving up its secrets, and we felt invincible. The center passage dropped 100 feet, over 300 yards. Our chalk marks and glow sticks glowed faintly behind us. Then Chester spotted the elevated passage. "John, look up there." I followed his flashlight beam to where the wall rose to our right. About 15 feet up was another opening. Unlike the others, it was perfectly round, for feet across, with a steady current of air flowing out. "Feel that breeze," Chester said, moving closer to the wall. I felt it. Cool, mossy, damp, but with something else underneath. Something I couldn't place. "We can't reach it," I said. "Not today, but with a ladder or a rope." He was already planning our next trip. I stared at the dark hole, uneasy. The air was too cold. carrying scents that didn't belong in limestone. I think we should head back, I said. We've been down here a while. Chester checked his phone. Yeah, past lunch. Your grandma's probably wondering. We followed our chalk arrows and glow sticks back to the surface. Faster this time. Sunlight hit like a flood, and I had to squint against it. Tomorrow we bring a ladder, Chester said. Maybe we should tell someone where we're going, I suggested, in case something happens. He gave me that look again, the one that said I worried too much. Nothing's gonna happen. It's just a cave. But as we walked back through the woods, I kept thinking about that opening and the air flowing from it. The scent felt familiar, like something half remembered from a dream. That night, I dreamed of deep places and moving air and woke with the taste of moss in my mouth. Chester showed up the next morning with his dad's aluminum stepladder, strapped to the four-wheeler, grinning like he had solved everything. Borrowed it while Dad was at work, he said, wrestling it off. He won't miss it for a few hours. The ladder was heavier than it looked, and hauling it through the woods was an expedition in itself. We stopped every 50 yards to rest and untangle it from branches. By the time we reached the cave, we were both sweating. This better be worth it, I muttered, helping him force it through the grate. Trust me, it will. Getting the ladder down the sloping passage was another challenge. It was awkward in the tight space, and my headlamp cast confusing shadows. But Chester was determined, and we finally got it against the wall. Hold it steady, he said, climbing. I braced it while his light swept the opening above. At the top, he went quiet. What do you see? I called. It goes back a long way, he said, muffled. He climbed down and we switched places. The ladder felt shaky under me, but I reached the opening. His flashlight had shown the tunnel stretching back, but what struck me was a sound. Water, dripping, echoing as if from a much larger space. You hear that? I called. Yeah, sounds like water. A lot of it. I climbed down, and we stared at each other in the glow of our lights. Underground river? I said, or a lake. Only one way to find out. The elevated passage was more open than I expected. We could walk upright. The walls smooth limestone worn by water. The smell grew stronger as we moved, and the air felt thicker, carrying scents that reminded me of things long dead. After 200 feet, the passage opened. I have spent years trying to find words for what we saw, and I still cannot do it justice. The cavern was vast, the size of a cathedral, the walls fading into darkness. In the center was a lake. The water was black and still, like a mirror reflecting nothing. Our lights reached only a few inches, and when Chester tossed and the pebbled ripples died too quickly, as if the water swallowed them. Jesus, Chester breathed, his voice echoing from the ceiling above. I swept my headlamp around the edges. The far shore was almost beyond reach, maybe 50 feet away. How deep do you think it is? Chester asked. I don't know. Deep. He was already digging in his pack. Let's find out. He cracked a glow stick, tied it to a rock with a rubber band, and tossed it in. The green light sank, and sank, and sank. It never reached bottom. The glow vanished into distance until the surface was black again, showing no trace of what we had dropped. That's not possible, Chester said, his confidence gone. I stepped back from the edge. The lake felt alien. The air too still, the silence too complete. Even our voices seemed muffled, as if the water absorbed them. We should go back, I said. But Chester was staring at the far shore, his light barely catching shapes in the dark. There's something over there, he said, on the other side. I looked. In the faint circle of light, I saw what might have been structures on the rock. Regular shapes that did not look natural. Chester, let's go back and think about this. We need a boat, he said, ignoring me. An inflatable raft. We could paddle over. The thought of being on that water clenched my stomach. That's crazy. We don't even know how deep it is. What if we fall in? We won't. I'm a good swimmer. In a lake that might not have a bottom? He looked at me then, really looked, and I saw he felt it too. The sense we had found something that should not exist. But Chester never backed down from anything. Tomorrow, he said, we'll think tonight and come back with a plan. As we left through the passage and down the ladder, I kept looking back. The darkness seemed deeper than it should, and I felt something in that water watching. That night I could not shake the image of the glow stick sinking into endless depths. In my dreams, I sank with it into darkness, so complete I could not tell if my eyes were open or closed. Chester showed up the next afternoon with a small inflatable raft strapped to his four-wheeler, the kind meant for lazy rivers. He also had life jackets, waterproof flashlights, and a hand pump. Where'd you get this? I asked, though I already knew. Borrowed from my cousin Jake. He won't miss it. I eyed the raft. It was 6 feet long, built for calm water, not underground lakes. Chester, I don't think that's gonna work. It'll be fine. It's rated for 2 people. We're light. Despite my doubts, I helped him haul it to the cave. His enthusiasm was hard to resist, and I was curious about the far shore. But the image of that glow stick sinking into black water never left my mind. Launching took longer than we expected. The rocky shore wasn't ideal, and we had to clear stone for a spot. The whole time I was aware of the water beside us, still as obsidian and reflecting our lights. You sure about this? I asked. It's just water. Worst case, we get wet. But it wasn't just water, and we both knew it. The lake felt wrong. No lapping at the shore, no movement at all. Even when disturbed, the ripples died too fast, as if the water was heavier than it looked. Chester climbed in first with a flashlight. The raft barely dented the surface, as if it floated on something solid. Come on, he said, steadying it. I climbed in reluctantly, paddle in hand. The moment we pushed off, I felt the lake take hold of us. It wasn't like floating, more like being suspended over an abyss. Paddle, Chester said, shining his light ahead. The rowing was strange. The water gave almost no resistance, yet the raft crawled forward, slower than it should have. It was like paddling through oil, though the water looked and felt normal when I touched it. This is taking forever, Chester muttered after what felt like 20 minutes. I looked back and my stomach dropped. The rocky ledge was much farther away than it should have been, barely visible in our glow. Ahead of us, the far shore seemed no closer than when we'd started. Chester, something's not right about this. Just keep paddling. We're almost there. But we weren't. The harder we paddled, the less progress we made. The far shore stayed distant while the shore behind us kept receding. It was as if the lake stretched itself, bending distance in ways that defied sense. Then Chester's light touched the far side, and we both went quiet. What the hell is that? He whispered. I don't know, but I don't like it. The structure was 30 feet across, ringed with strange stone pillars. The rock was darker than limestone, smooth and almost metallic. Carved channels ran toward the water, and in the center stood something like an altar, though it was built for no human shape I could imagine. We need to get closer, Chester said, but without his usual confidence. No, we need to go back. Now! I turned the raft, but he grabbed my arm. Wait, look at the water. I followed his gaze. The water glowed faintly, as if light rose from something far below. The glow was subtle but unmistakable. The surface shifted, a slow bulge rising as though some unseen current was pushing up from the depths. There's something down there, Chester said. Something big. Then our gear failed. Chester's flashlight flickered and died. My headlamp dimmed despite fresh batteries. Even my watch froze at 3:47. Chester, we're leaving. Now, I said, cracking a glow stick. He didn't argue. We paddled hard toward what we thought was shore, but the darkness pressed in and our failing lights showed almost nothing beyond the raft. Then we heard it, a sound from beneath us, deep and resonant, like rock and metal groaning under pressure. It rose from the depths and vibrated through the water and into our bones. Ripples spread across the surface and faded too quickly. The raft shuddered. Paddle faster, Chester said, and for the first time I heard fear in his voice. The sound came again, closer. The water around us began to glow, the light moving upward as if something vast was rising. We paddled in silence, our failing lights barely cutting the dark. The shore seemed impossibly far, and with every stroke I was sure we would not make it. but somehow we did. The raft scraped the rocks just as my headlamp died. We dragged it out and collapsed on the cabin floor, shaking in the shine of our last glow stick. "We can't tell anyone," Chester said finally. "They'd think we were crazy." I nodded, though part of me wondered if we were. The whole thing felt like a nightmare. As we packed up, I made the mistake of looking back. The water was still again, but I was certain something in that blackness was looking at us. For 3 days I avoided the cave. I stayed close to the house, helped Grandma with chores, even started reading one of her old romance novels just to keep busy. But Chester would not let it go. He showed up with a restless energy I had never seen. "You can't just pretend it didn't happen," he said one Thursday morning on the porch. "We found something incredible. We found something dangerous," I said. "Our lights failed, Chester. All of them, at the same time. So we bring backups, more batteries, better lights." I looked at him and realized what I had mistaken for confidence was obsession. He could not sit still. Dark circles under his eyes showed he was not sleeping. "I need to go back," he said, leaning forward. "Don't you want to know what it was?" "No, I don't." Chester stood and paced to the edge of the porch. "Fine, then I'll go alone." "You can't. Watch me." I felt trapped between two choices. Let Chester go alone, or return to something I wanted to forget. The thought of him down there by himself was worse than my fear. "If I go with you," I said, "we go at dawn. We bring extra everything. And at the first sign of trouble, we leave. No arguments." Chester grinned. "Hollow. Deal." That afternoon, we gathered supplies. Chester had found a larger raft, more stable than the first, borrowed from my sister's boyfriend. We packed flashlights, batteries, glow sticks, rope, even a first aid kit. Looking back, it was an expedition, not an adventure. "One more thing," Chester said as we loaded the four-wheeler. "I want to actually reach the far shore this time. Get a closer look." Every instinct screamed no, but I had committed. And despite my fear, I was curious. The shapes we had seen haunted my dreams. I needed to know. The forest felt different on the way back. Quieter. Even the birds were silent. We slipped through the grate and down to the lake, our equipment heavier with every step. The cabin was as we left it, vast and still. The water stretched into darkness, smooth as glass. Against every survival instinct, I helped him launch the boat. The crossing dragged, and with each stroke, I was more certain we were making a mistake. But something was different about the far shore. "Are those lights?" I asked, squinting. Chester raised the binoculars and went still. "There's something over there." "What?" "On the far shore. I see movement. And you're right, there are lights. Not flashlights. Something else. Something that glows." I snatched binoculars. In the distance, a faint blue-green glow flickered, like the bioluminescence in the water. "Chester, we're turning around right now," I said, handing them back. My voice was a hoarse whisper. He looked through them again and gasped. Chester had gone completely silent. His mouth moved, but no words came at first. Then, in a whisper that grew louder, he began repeating, "It comes out of the water. It goes into the water. It comes out of the water. It goes into the water." I shook him, but he wouldn't stop. His eyes were fixed on the far shore, wide and shining, as though he was watching something emerge that I couldn't yet see. That's when the water around us began to glow. The luminescence rose from the depths like we'd seen before, but this time it was brighter, more intense. And in that growing light, I could see the true scale of what lay beneath the water. It wasn't a lake at all. It wasn't a lake. It went down forever. An eye, a well, a portal, an abyss eternal and bottomless, vast and deep. Alien light, forever and ever. I screamed. I know I screamed because my throat was raw afterward, but I couldn't hear the sound over the roar of blood in my ears. Chester was screaming too, or maybe laughing. I couldn't tell which. The eye blinked. The entire cavern shuddered as something the size of a mountain moved beneath us. Water that wasn't water displaced around us, and our tiny raft was suddenly riding waves that shouldn't exist in an underground space. This shook Chester out of his fugue. We both dug our paddles into the glowing surface, fighting against currents that felt more like muscle contractions and water flow. As we stumbled out of the boat onto the shore, I made the mistake of looking back. The eye was there, staring up at us through bottomless layers of water that should have blocked any light. And in that ancient gaze, I saw a recognition. It saw us. It saw into us and know us. Something in Chester's mind shattered. I could see in his eyes. I grabbed him and dragged him down the tunnel. We abandoned the raft and ran for the passage, leaving our carefully gathered equipment scattered on the cavern floor, up through the elevated passage, down the ladder we didn't even bother to retrieve, through the cave system toward the blessed light of day. We burst from the cave into afternoon sunlight that felt impossibly bright and clean. Chester collapsed immediately, retching onto the forest floor. I managed to stay upright long enough to drag him away from the cave entrance before my own legs gave out. Chester was never the same after that day. His laugh, the easy confidence that used to pull me along into trouble, all of it vanished. He hardly spoke, and when he did it was whispers about water and eyes that never stopped watching. Before the summer was over, his parents sent him away to a hospital in the big city. Someplace special, they said, though they never used the word I knew they meant. I never saw him again. At first I thought he'd come back the next summer, that we'd pick up where we left off like nothing had happened. But his absence became permanent, a hollow space I couldn't fill. I carried the weight of it alone, pretending normal life was still possible while the memory pressed against me like the dark water under the hills. That was 10 years ago. I've been in therapy on and off ever since, cycling through doctors who nod sympathetically when I tell them about recurring nightmares of black water and watching eyes. They prescribe medications for anxiety and sleep disorders, but nothing stops the dreams completely. Chester wasn't as lucky. The last I heard, he was living on the streets, talking to things that weren't there and insisting that something was still watching him. When Grandma Edith passed a year ago and left me the house, the first thing I did was hire a contractor to seal the cave entrance with concrete and rebar. I told him it was a safety hazard. I paid him extra to use twice as much concrete as necessary, and to never mention the job to anyone. Some doors, once opened, should stay closed forever. Late at night, I swear that sometimes I can still hear the sound of water moving far beneath the ground. Story 4. I can't find my camera. A few days ago, I decided to go on a hike on a small trail by my house. I had just bought a new Polaroid camera and wanted to test it out by getting some nice pictures of nature. Truth be told, I had bought the camera with the intention of capturing all the fun things me and my friends did over the summer. Only there weren't many memories to capture or that many friends to see. I spent most of my summer on solitary hikes, bike rides, and anything else I could think of to get myself outside. So, if I'm not going to collect pictures of my friends and I am at least going to get some pictures of the hikes that I have been taking. I drove to the trail that was about 15 minutes from my house. I had the day off, and it was a beautiful afternoon with the sun shining and perfect weather. I wasn't planning on being out very long, so all I had brought with me was a camera and my water bottle. When I got to the parking lot of the nature trail, I noticed that I was the only car there. Nothing too out of the ordinary. But I would have expected at least a couple other cars to be there with the weather being so nice, and it being 1 in the afternoon on a Sunday. Not that I was complaining, though. I was looking forward to not having any awkward interactions with people also enjoying the trail. As I started walking along, I took a few pictures of some trees and flowers that I noticed along the way. I was surprised at how nice the pictures looked. I don't know exactly what I was expecting, but found myself surprised at the clarity and detail I could see in the pictures. I was enjoying my hike and getting lost in my thoughts as I walked along. I had been to this trail multiple times this summer and was starting to get the feeling of familiarity in the woods. Ever since I was a kid, I loved to get to know new places in the wilderness. It's amazing how when you look at any piece of wooded area, it all looks the same. The branches, the brush, the leaves, they all blend into each other. Once you walk a certain area enough, though, You start to notice the distinguishing features, the tree with a knot protruding out, or a limb that splits off at just the right angle to sear into your memory. I've always felt that when I can reach that point in a specific area of wilderness, that I am somehow connected with it, that it stays with me. This specific trail was starting to feel that way to me, and I was happy that I would have physical pictures to help tie me to it. I was coming up on a bend in the path when I first noticed one of my favorite distinguishing features. As the trail curved to the right, there was a tree with a large protruding knot on the left side of it. I raised my camera, paused for a second, took a picture of the tree, and continued down the trail. I kept walking as I waited for the picture to develop. As much as I wanted to, I had read on a review of this camera that shaking Polaroid pictures are actually bad for them despite what the Outcast song from my childhood had told me. I had walked a fair distance, at least 5 minutes, when I figured that enough time had passed for the picture to have developed. At first the picture seemed fine. In fact, I was surprised it wasn't blurry, as I was afraid that I hadn't stopped moving long enough when I took the picture. I noticed something though as I stared at it. There were 2 knots on the tree, one on the left, like there had always been, but there was also one on the right this time. I stopped walking and pulled the picture closer to my face. That wasn't a knot on the right side of the tree. It was someone's head. It was a face, and it was staring directly at me in my camera. In an instant, I could feel the silence of the wilderness. It felt like the trees were pushing in on me. There weren't any other cars. Had someone gotten here after me and somehow gotten ahead of me? There's no way, I thought, I would have heard them. The face in the picture was that of a man. I couldn't tell how old they were, but I could see an unkempt beard and long hair. More than anything I could see, they were smiling. I started to scan the environment around me at a blistering pace. Were they following me? Had they been following me this whole time? I decided that I wasn't going to stick around to find out. The trail that I was on formed a big loop, and I had already passed the halfway point. Not only that, but I had no intention of going back the way I came and running into whoever was in that picture. Why were they hiding behind that tree, and why hadn't they said anything? If they were following me, I didn't want them to know that I had seen them, so I decided to just keep walking the way I was going, if not a little faster now. My senses were all on red alert. I felt like I could hear and smell everything in the woods. Every stick that broke, branch that groaned in the wind, it would send a panic all over my body. After about 5 minutes of this, I couldn't shake it. There were sticks breaking behind me. Not randomly either. Someone was definitely following me. I turned to see, and all I could see was the camouflage of the wilderness. Whatever sense of familiarity that I thought I was gaining about these woods was now completely gone. It all blended together again, and looked like somewhere I had never been. One thing immediately jumped out to me though. I saw him. He was crouched down in some brush, but he was there, looking at me, smiling at me. I've never seen a smile like that. His teeth were yellow and rotted out, and it looked like something was hanging out of his mouth. There was some kind of animal's tail sticking out of those cracked and smiling lips. I could see now that blood was dripping from his beard. My mind registered these things, and I turned as fast as I could into a full-on sprinting stride. As I took that first giant step, my right shoulder hit a tree that I was standing next to. The camera was in my right hand and fell to the ground. I don't remember if I even registered that it had happened, as all I could think about was running and not falling. The run back to my car was a blur. I almost lost my footing a few times, but was able to stay upright and made it back. In my head, I could hear him the whole way, inches behind me, that smile still on his face. I don't know if that's what really happened, or if my mind created that in its fight or flight response to get me to run faster. But I swear I could smell him. It smelled like death was following me. I drove faster than I should have to get home, and collapsed on my bed when I got there. After a couple hours, I realized that I didn't have my camera on me anymore. I did still have the pictures that I took though. I had been putting them in my back pocket as I went along. I pulled them out to look them over. The picture on top was of the tree, of the man, of that smile. I threw it across the room before I could get a good look at it again. I don't know if I ever want to look at that picture again. The next picture was a close-up of a flower that I had seen. Again, it turned out great. Man, I'm going to miss that camera. The next picture was a straight-on picture of the trail. As I looked close, I saw him, along the east side of the trail. He was standing next to a tree, and this time I could see his whole body. He had on a dark trench coat with black military boots underneath. He had something in his hand. I could see the tail and then made out the rest. It was a mouse. Well, not a whole mouse. The top half of the mouse was missing, and I could see the blood pouring down. I also saw the blood on those dry, cracked lips. Was that the same mouse from the first picture I saw him in? I didn't see anything in the next two pictures. The last picture was a selfie of me sitting in my car before I started the hike. I hadn't looked at this one after I took it, but now I wish that I had. Behind me in the picture, standing at the backside of my car, was the man. Only he wasn't smiling this time. This time he had the head of the mouse in his mouth, and it looked like he was biting down. His eyes. I've never seen such hatred and anger in someone's eyes before. I decided to burn the pictures. I didn't want them or him around me. I didn't want to become familiar with that spot after all. I went out to my backyard to put the pictures in my fire pit. As I got to it and looked down, I saw there was already a picture sitting on top of firewood that was stacked in there. It was face down, so I picked it up and turned it over. Hanging in front of the camera and in focus was a mouse. It was obviously dead as one of its eyes were bulging out and blood was dripping from its mouth. Behind the mouse and out of focus was a house. My house. I could swear I could hear sticks breaking and could catch the faintest scent of death on the air as I burned all the pictures. Story 5. I don't think this cabin was built for people. I thought the mountain was hollow. Not in the geological sense. No sinkholes. No caverns plotted on topo maps. I mean, it felt wrong underfoot, like walking on the skin of something holding its breath. I told myself that 3 times on the drive up, a joke that didn't land. I'd rented a cabin that promised total seclusion. No neighbors for miles. The kind of place where quiet is the main feature. The photos showed wood siding the color toast, a chimney thick enough for a century of winters, a deck buried in snow. The owner's directions were simple. Follow a county road, pass a closed campground, take a service track behind a rusted cattle gate. Key is in the lockbox. Their message said, wood in the shed. If you need me, ranger office downtown usually knows how to reach me. No one knew I was going. I wanted silence. Phones off. Inbox forgotten. No city noise pretending to be life. Just nothing. The last bar of reception vanished around noon. The pines leaned close to the higher I climbed. Past the campground, past picnic tables that looked fossilized, the world thinned until even the wind seemed hesitant. By the time I rolled to the cattle gate, the quiet pressed so hard my ears popped. The trees bled black resin, not amber beads. Tar dark veins that slicked down bark into the snow. Where it touched, the snow dented, like something had pushed up from beneath to meet it halfway. The cabin sat in an oval clearing, more absence than space. The deck leaned, the chimney sagged, the door was too new. When I stepped inside, dust rose like breath on a mirror. It was fine, cold, but fine, with stove in the corner, a bed frame that looked built by a 12-year-old. Shrink-wrap film on the windows bubbling at the seams. The thermometer on the wall read 38 degrees. I fed the stove from the stacked firewood. The first log caught, filling the air with the smell every cabin candle is trying to earn. The quiet didn't soften. If anything, it pressed harder, like a rule posted without words. I tried to sleep on the couch that first night, fire burning high. Around midnight, the stove hiccuped. Smoke pressed down into the room before the draft corrected. I thought that was the worst of it until I heard the scrape. Not skittering, not mice. A slow drag beneath the floorboards, stone on stone. The wood shifted a fraction, like something was testing the weight above. I pressed my hand to the floor. Felt it, steady, deliberate, then gone. I didn't sleep. By morning I told myself it was frost heave or ice shifting in the soil. Something natural, something boring. But that night the scraping came again, multiplied, drifting beneath the stove, on the bathroom, under my bed. The boards rose and fell in rhythm. Not human, not animal. Too even, like the floor itself was inhaling. I whispered, "No," just to hear something human. I didn't leave. Not yet. The next morning, I stepped onto the deck with coffee. That's when the tree lean moved. Something slid between the pines, taller than the trees themselves. For a moment, it looked like a pillar of bark. Then it leaned, and cracks split open to reveal pale matter shifting beneath armor-like plates. Its head sagged forward, eyeless, mouthless, until cartilage ground open in a ring, wet and deliberate. The sound wasn't animal. It was structural, like a building deciding to fail. I bolted back inside and shut the curtains. As if that would matter, the truck wouldn't start. The dash lit up fine, the starter groaned, but the engine stayed silent. When I looked back toward the tree lean, there were more of them, a row, not walking, growing, plates locking into place as they rose taller, mouths opening soundlessly until the air vibrated hard enough to rattle my teeth. By morning, they were gone, but the floor wasn't. When I woke the next day, the boards around my bed were damp. Black veins ran across the floor, pulsing faintly, leading back to the stove. The iron sagged a quarter inch toward the ground, as if something below was pulling it down. I called the ranger station, left a voicemail that sounded sane, words like possible frost heave and safety issue. No one called me back. By afternoon, the silence had a pulse. Snow fell straight down, no wind, piling uniformly on the deck as if placed there. That night the stove failed again, coughing smoke into the room. I opened the door for air, then froze. One of them stood at the clearing's edge, closer than any had dared, plates shifting, height adjusting, watching without eyes. I slammed the door, dead-bolted, dragged the dresser against the bedroom door, even though I didn't plan on using it, sat in the dark with the axe across my lap and the pry bar from the shed in my hand. At midnight, the floor inhaled. Every board lifted under me. The stove pipe bent as if tugged. The temperature dropped 6 degrees in a minute. I yanked up a floorboard. Beneath it wasn't dirt, but fine black grounds threaded with pulsing veins. When I cut one with the axe, it stitched itself back together instantly. The ground beneath the foundation pulsed, pushing into the cabin's frame like a lung exhaling against my ribs. I did the only thing I could think of. Fire. I tore shrink wrap off the windows, built a second blaze in the old hearth scar under the rug, fed it books, papers, anything that would burn. Flames licked high, but the smoke flattened under the ceiling like a lid was pressed down. From beneath, a sound tried to form into a word. Not speech, just the shape of it. 30 mouths guessing at vowels at once. That was enough. I grabbed my pack, scarf, axe, headlamp, crawled under the floor again, jammed the pry bar across the seam near the stove. The foundation clenched, the metal bent, and I dumped the stove's ash bucket into the crack. Embers glowed and died like something below had breathed them out. I didn't wait for proof. I ran. The clearing was smaller. Trees leaned inward. The ground caught at my boots, granular like walking on beans. The tall shape waited at the edge, height adjusting, pale matter flexing inside plates. I aimed for the only gap that looked like a corridor and sprinted. Behind me, the cabin exhaled. The sound stripped the heat off my back. I don't remember crossing the gate, just a pin between my teeth, the chain giving, and the road widening until the world finally sounded alive again. Birds, water, a snowplow dragging its blade. At the first gas station, I left another voicemail. The ground at that cabin isn't right. The floor breathes. Something in the trees. Please. I stopped before I said eats people. Said hurts people instead. No one called back. That was weeks ago. I thought I was safe. But last night, in my apartment 3 floors up, the quiet shifted. My ears popped. I pressed my hand to the floor and told myself I was cured by data. Then I heard it. A faint drag, rearranging something granular. Not loud, not close. Just the sound of 1,000 hands under a floor, moving, remembering. And I don't think it wants me back on the mountain. I think the mountain is coming here. Story 6. My father was a cult leader. He took my eyes so that I might see. My life was ruined the day I turned 12 years old. Everyone wants to know what it was like growing up in a cult. They want to hear all the sordid details. Did they beat you? Cut you? Was it a sex thing? If you're not careful, you turn into an object of fascination, a human curio. All anyone cares about is what horrible thing might have happened in your past. And when you tell them the truth, they have the gall to be disappointed. The truth is that before my 12th birthday, my life was ordinary. I grew up in a position of privilege, while my mother was just a washerwoman. My father was someone of status. He was the leader of our church. While he had many wives and many children, I was the only son. That meant I was treated with respect and deference. I wasn't beaten or tortured. Neither were any of my friends or our half-sisters. The only difference between my upbringing and others is while most parents probably read their children Dr. Seuss, my father would read me the Apocrypha to rock me sleep. Like I said, a perfectly average life. I had a friend, B. We were born on the same day, 2 hours apart. For the next 12 years, we lived right next to each other. We spent every moment of our growing up in each other's company. We loved all the same things. Swimming, playing with wooden swords, building imaginary cities out crumbling stones of our home. But above all else, we loved to explore. We did not live in houses built by our own hand or surrounded by the confines of barbed wire trace fences like most cults. We lived in the ruins, or sanctuary as we referred to them. When our ancestors came to the valley, lost, starving, and half insane, they took the crumbling buildings as a sign from God. This was the paradise deity wished for us to inhabit. The ruins were a sprawling complex, crumbling roads and buildings all made of decaying stone cut from an unknown quarry. At the center of it all was a great Gothic tower, stretching high over the landscape. It covered our entire settlement in its shadow. On quiet days, when the sky was overcast and muffled, some claimed you could hear it humming, a deep throaty noise that shook your bones and boiled your blood. I can only imagine how desperate my progenitors must have been to see this place as their salvation. B and I first discovered the underground passages when we were 10. They formed a twisting labyrinth that extended beneath the whole city proper. We believed we had uncovered a great mystery, known only to ourselves, and began to explore those dark passages, armed with borrowed candles and chalk. Our mothers discovered our first attempts and forbade us from going back into those depths. But while we pretended to agree to never return, we would sneak away whenever we could continue our efforts. We discovered many things, secret passages between houses, abandoned rooms attached to our subterranean playground. Sometimes we even came across hidden places. When I was 11 years old, B and I had discovered a secret room attached to one of the tunnels. B had tripped on a rock and fallen through a wall. When he tried to catch himself, the hole he created led to an open space, a room with a low ceiling. The walls were covered with all manner carvings and words that looked to be written in Greek. We were required to learn all the biblical languages as part of our grade school education. So we were familiar, but these words were different. The composition was all wrong, and the letters were scrambled and jumbled in odd formations. B and I immediately made this into our own personal hideout. We would examine the pictures and strange words, sounding them out with untrained tongues and imagined pronunciations. We would speculate on their origins and revel in the knowledge that no one knew of this room except for us. One Sunday, we snuck off after church service to be in our hideout. In our tradition, the first part of worship was held in the courtyard of the tower every Sunday and was attended by all. The second session was held directly afterwards in the tower. Children were not allowed to attend. B and I often took advantage of this lack of supervision and went to the tunnels. That Sunday, we made our way to the room and began our usual game of creating theories as to what the words on the wall said. We were focused on a series of symbols that appeared together in several places around the room. Maybe it's a verb? I looked at B. His face was drawn up in an almost comical look of concentration, but he wasn't playing it up. B just took thinking very seriously. I think it's a name. That's stupid. No, it's not. B looked at me, indignant. Look how many times they wrote it. That could be a sign. Elder Luke told me That's a way you can tell. Elder Luke was our school teacher. He knew more about Christian lore than any other person alive. But that was not the most interesting thing about him. He had no arms. This wasn't especially odd. It seemed like a lot of adults where we lived had similar problems. Some were missing fingers, toes. Elder Mark was missing his right leg from the knee down, but Elder Luke was missing both of his upper limbs and was impaired by his lack. Each shoulder ended in a stump 2 inches extended from his torso. He was the most intelligent child in our class. Elder Luke often turned to him when he needed to write things down. They also spent extra time together in tutoring sessions. Everyone knew it was to prepare B for his future calling. With his brain, it was only natural B would become a teacher and scriptorian. I don't think it's a name. To tell the truth, I had no evidence to suggest otherwise. I was just jealous B seemed to be right about everything. I struggled in school, and sometimes I saw Elder Luke whispering to my father at church, glancing in my direction. I was sure they were talking about how poorly I was doing. B ignored me. He got close to the word and traced it with his finger. Dirt came away from it in fine grains, making the etching stand out on the wall. It looks familiar. I think I've read it somewhere before. I probably kept arguing, except my thoughts were interrupted by a noise. It sounded like someone speaking. B and I looked at each other and blew out our candles. Our mothers had caught us in the tunnels a few weeks ago, and we weren't eager to repeat that experience. But as we waited in the dark, the sound developed. It wasn't our mothers. It was human, but it wasn't the tones of a normal composed voice. It was a pleading and begging wail. It grew louder and more ragged. The desperate noise echoed on the walls, and I felt the hair on my neck prickle. The sound continued to expand. It became an open-mouthed keening, the kind you hear when one's misery is so great the words don't have time to form in your brain before the pain comes out of your throat. I had heard Sister Mary make that noise when her son had died of fever. It had gone on for what felt like years. At the time, I worried she would die too if she didn't stop. I found B in the dark and pulled myself closer to him. I felt B shift beside me, searching for something. There was a flare, and B relit his candle with a small piece of cloth he had set alight with his flint. He patted out the cloth until it stopped smoking and put it in his pocket. He reached over with his candle and lit mine. I got up to look out the hole. I was worried that I would see whatever was making that sound the moment I poked my head out. But once my eyes cleared the wall, I saw nothing down either path. He had a determined look on his face. Let's see what it is. What? It sounds close. I shook my head. That's crazy. That noise feels wrong. He got up to peek out with me. It sounded like crying. Someone might be hurt. This pricked my conscience. We were taught to help each other in church. Imagining someone down there, broken and afraid, was just enough an emotional hit to make me rethink my fear. Fine, I hate you. Yeah, but your mother doesn't. I swung to hit B on the arm, but he ducked out of the way. He grinned at me. The playfulness cut the tension a bit, and I could almost tell myself everything would be fine. But the noise sounding in my ears a moment later brought back all the old fears. B left the room first. He stepped out into the dark and made his way down the right-hand tunnel. I followed. My feet dragged on the ground as I tried to keep up with him. We held our candles aloft, tiny pin pricks of light in the overpowering gloom. With each turn in the tunnel, we went deeper. Soon, we exhausted all our familiar routes. When we turned onto an unknown path and heard the noise increase in volume, we knew we were close. The keening grew louder with each step. It began to reverberate in my chest. I wanted to cover my ears, to block it out. At every junction, I worried we were about to run headlong into the source of this terrible sound, only to feel relief when we saw nothing. But then we continue on, and the noise would grow clearer and more terrible than before. Then just as we made another turn, the noise stopped. Everything was silent. It was a long time until we began to hear the noise of the cave again. The dripping of water and the echo of flowing air. B took another step forward, but I grabbed his shoulder. Let's go. We're gonna get lost. It sounded like it was right around the corner. It's gone. If we don't get back, soon they're gonna notice we're not there. He shrugged off my hand and ran forward. I followed behind, not wanting to be left alone. We didn't have to go far. We ran into a dead end almost immediately. It was a brick wall, similar to the kind that had blocked up our secret room. The stone was different from that of the tunnel. It was old, weathered, and was missing 2 bricks that had come loose and fallen to the ground. Where the 2 bricks had been was a dark hole. We peered into it. I couldn't see anything with the light of my candle. It was almost like the dark inside was swallowing the feeble yellow rays. My eyes played tricks on me. In the pitch black, it looked like shadows were moving around in the space beyond. Can we go? Please. We kept peering into the hole. I think I see something. We'll come back later, okay? We're gonna get caught. I looked over my shoulder. I didn't want to say it out loud, but it felt like someone was down here with us, watching. I saw no movement, but I couldn't help feeling like eyes were searching all over my body. He turned to look at me and saw how scared I was. He nodded slow and pushed me forward. Okay, let's go. It took a long time to get to the surface. We had to double back a few times to make up for some incorrect turns. But eventually, we were in the sunlight again, and we joined up with the other children just as the adults returned from their meeting in the tower. I saw my father lead them out. Our mothers opened their arms to receive us. Bea and I embraced them. But even in the warmth of relief and safety, I couldn't shake the cold feeling that still clung to my chest and mind. While Bea and I still were in the room with the words, we never spoke of that noise again. Mostly, this was my fault. I had a hard time sleeping after the incident, and every time he tried to bring up the subject, I would shut him down. A year passed, and I prepared for the acceptance of my calling and entrance into manhood. I had known since I was young that I was to become the next patriarch, when it was time for my father to step down. That meant more school and more time spent in his shadow. Before long, I didn't have much time to spend with Bea anymore, and we stopped exploring the caverns. Father would take me on long walks, explaining the importance of his role as leader. He often said strange things that made little sense to me. One night, as we were tending to my mother's garden, he began to talk of the future and how I would lead our church. You must see things others can't see. He went to grab a weed, his hand missing the stem. He readjusted, grasped it with a firm hand, and pulled out the root still intact. My father only possessed one eye. It was light blue, and sometimes I felt it peer into my very soul. The empty socket was covered up in a bandage that swept over the side of his face. I was old enough to think it was ironic that a man with one eye was telling me to see things, but I didn't voice it. My father was a strict man. I had never seen his rage, but there was a coldness in his demeanor that made me fall silent in his presence. It took all my energy to find my voice to ask the proper question. How do I do that? I couldn't bring myself to finish the sentence, but Father knew what I meant. I was too stupid, too slow. I barely saw what was under my own nose. Be patient, son. Father scooted closer to me and put a hand on my shoulder. It was cold and a little wet from the soil, but it was also comforting. You will understand. You are my blood. This is how it has been and will be. I wasn't so sure, but I nodded and went back to work. I was still years away from any sort of responsibility, and there were more exciting things to look forward to now. I was approaching my birthday, my 12th birthday. On that day, I would enter the tower. It was a rite of passage for us. Most entered at the age of 15. Father had arranged it, so I might enter early. He felt I was ready. I had looked forward to this day for as long as I could remember. Whenever anyone left the tower after worship, they always had the most blissful look of joy upon their faces. I wanted that. I wanted to feel that joy, to see what was inside, to peer down from the top of its embankments and to see the entire valley like a bird might. The night before my birthday, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned in my bed, imagining all the things that could possibly be inside of that strange and mysterious building. It was near the middle of the night when I heard my mother crying. I crept out of my cot and went to check on her. I had been spending time away to receive instruction from my father, and this next step was one that would alter our relationship. I would be a man when I emerged. I knew she wasn't ready to let go of her little boy. I approached her living space and peeked in. She was kneeling by her cot, her hands clasped in pleading supplication. I could not hear what she said, but I knew it to be whispered begging. "Please, God, do not take my boy," was the only phrase I heard in its completeness. I wanted to comfort her, but I couldn't make myself enter the room. I had the strange feeling I was seeing something I was not supposed to see. After a moment or two of indecision, I crept on light feet back to my own cot. I lay down, but I still couldn't sleep. A new nervousness ate at my belly and made me stare at the dark ceiling until the light of torches roused from my bed. The time had come. Outside, my father and 2 attendants waited for my arrival. I roused and got dressed in ceremonial robes of white. My mother presented them to me. Her eyes were dry, with seemingly no trace of crying she had done the night before. Only a slight twinge of red betrayed her secret tears. I slipped the robes over my head and gave her a hug, hoping to show her that everything was fine, that we would still be mother and son even after the events of this day. She held me tight for a moment, her hands clasped around me. Then, when I began to wonder if she would ever let me go, I felt her hands release. I kissed her on the cheek, then followed my father out of our house and to the tower. Some had come to watch our procession. I saw B, staring at me with a serious look on his face. I smiled at him and waved, but all he gave me in return was a distracted nod. He looked up at the tower, then back at me. Eventually, our procession moved beyond his place, and he was lost in the crowd. The tower loomed larger with every step, and eventually we came to its entrance. My father stopped me. He turned me toward him and looked me in the eyes. "Son, a leader takes his role willingly." His one eye caught mine, and I had to fight the urge to look down. "Will you do what I say when the time comes?" I swallowed down the nervous bile that was rising in the back of my throat. I nodded. Father turned and opened the door to the tower. We stepped inside. It was dark. No light from the outside penetrated the stone walls. The torches the 2 attendants carried lit up the space. I looked up, surprised to see that the inside of the building was almost entirely hollow except for wooden supports. I could see all the way up to the roof, a small dark circle high above us. There was a door at the far side. Father approached it and swung it open. Beyond it was a staircase leading downward. He bade me to follow and then descended down into the darkness. I waited a moment, anxious. Then I followed. I don't know how far down we went. I lost track of time, trying to keep my footing on the cold stone stairs. I tried to keep pace with my father, his form obscured at the edge of the torchlight. The air grew cold, like it did in the tunnels under the city. I saw my breath coalesce in front of my face. I shivered, but I tried to hide it by stepping more firmly and clenching my muscles. Without warning, the staircase leveled out into a smooth stone floor, cut directly into the rock. It stretched out to a small door at the end of the hallway. I swallowed and felt my ears pop. How deep had we gone? Father made his way down the hall and opened the door, revealing a dark space on the other side. I approached until I was at his side. He gestured for me to go through before him. I took a deep breath and went into the blackness. On the other side of the door was a large chamber. Its walls were smooth, unblemished. If it had been carved out of rock, it had not been done by any human means. The polished surface almost reflected back the torchlight. Strange shapes I could not make out were huddled against the sides, and after a moment's inspection, I realized there were large containers made from sanded wood and iron hinges. "Son," my eyes went to my father. He had made his way to the center of the room without me noticing. He beckoned me with his hand. He stood next to a low stone table. The stone was cut at impossible right angles. The edges looked sharp enough to cut flesh. I came to him, aware of the attendants that followed close behind me. Surrounding the table were stone benches that made concentric circles like a theater in the round. "Lay down." Father moved aside to grant me access to the flat surface. I hesitated. I felt what I had in those tunnels a year ago, like eyes all around the room were watching us. I thought I could hear whispers and the echoes of our footsteps. The darkness had encompassed us so completely I could no longer see the walls. The air was strangely thick and hard to breathe. "It's all right, son." My father's voice brought me back. I looked at him and he smiled. He had never smiled at me before. I laid down on the slab. Father walked to the edge of the room. He spoke aloud to me, his voice bouncing off the walls and ceilings of the dome. It sounded to me as if he had never left my side. You have been instructed about the purpose of life. Tell me now, what is that purpose? To learn of the Almighty. This is correct. And can you tell me why? I struggled to remember what Elder Luke had taught us in school. I heard the sound of wood creaking. To prepare ourselves for heaven? Father didn't respond. I heard the clink of metal. I turned to look at him. His back was to me, and he was hunched over one of the boxes at the room's edge. Finally, he rose up and turned back to me. I looked up at the ceiling. Half drew, "Tell me, son, what is heaven? A place? That is what is taught." Father drew closer to me. His footsteps grew louder, and I fought to still my pounding heart. Both attendants stood at my side, torches in the air, their faces looking grim. But it is a lie. Heaven is not a place. It is knowledge. How do we gain knowledge? I knew the answer to this. It was part of a phrase Elder Luke recited to me almost every day. He loved to say it when I couldn't remember the chapter or verse he was referring to. By sacrifice. My father stood above me now. His one eye stared down at me, cold and dark. My heart was beating out of my chest. I told you that you would need to see what others could not. Father moved his hand, and in it I could see a strange metallic instrument. One side was flat and sharp on the edge. The other was scooped like a spoon. He held it to a torch and it started to glow hot in the firelight. "Prepare yourself, son. It will only hurt for a moment." I knew then what he meant to do. Any courage that I had broke. I tried to get up, but the attendants pushed down my arms. I began to scream. No, and oh, please, Father. I don't want to. Stop. I wasn't a man. I was just a scared little boy. I couldn't do this. I couldn't do what my father wanted. The attendants became uncomfortable. One looked at Father. He's not willing. Father's head moved with a jerk to look at him. For the first time in my life, I saw his anger. It burned dark and intensely on his features. I quavered and fell silent. Father held the gaze of the other attendant for a long moment. He agreed. That is what matters. The metal instrument descended, smoking. I saw the scooped edge come closer and closer to my face. I tried to shut my eyes against it, but I felt the steady pressure of Father's fingers pulling open the skin. I felt the heat of the metal held close. It was already unbearable. Father was strong, and it took no effort for him to secure my thrashing head with one hand. I cried out, and tears ran down my face in twin rivers. I tasted salt as they flowed into my open mouth. I pled with my father, begged him to stop. The knife connected with my right eye. It burned. It pressed deep into my skull. I saw bright flashes that took up the entire right side of my vision. I screamed so loud I felt my throat crack, and I tasted the iron of blood. I felt liquid on my cheek that was thicker than my tears. The knife slowly passed around the entirety of the socket, singeing the skin away like tissue. Father pulled, and it felt like a hot iron bar was being shoved through my head. After a moment of intense agony, I felt something give, and there was pressure on my right cheek. When I opened my left eye, I saw the opposite orb resting against my flesh, connected only by a thin string of bleeding flesh. Father took up the eye, his fingers painfully cold upon it, and he severed the optic nerve. Everything went dark. I wanted to die. I wanted it to be over. I wondered if I was already dead. I could still feel the slab beneath me, the blood and tears on my face, the ache of my burns. The darkness gathered. What had been pure blackness before coalesced into shapes. Terrible beings defying all logic. They were all around me, staring at me with eyes half obscured. Some had many limbs, and others' bodies covered with mouths. They pressed forward, and I could feel their breath, the touch of their hands. They were so cold. I tried to fight, but the pain of it all was too great, and my arms and legs weakened. I felt my consciousness flee to a place where it might never return. I heard my father speak before my mind left me. "Well done, my son." When I woke up, I was in an ambulance. It has taken me years to recover from the lies of my childhood. I was young and not privy to all the complicated happenings of the outside world, nor were they spoken about in my presence. To me, there was no world outside of our community. When I emerged unconscious in the tower, the settlement was being raided by the FBI. Hikers have been going missing in the areas adjacent to our city for years. Investigations had uncovered disturbing documentation that indicated the violation of human rights. One look at me, and my missing I told them everything they needed to know. I was taken away and my father was arrested. Far from being comforting, I was terrified. People joke about bringing those from the past to the modern era, about how they would go insane if they saw the progress of mankind. I very nearly did. For most of a month, I was sedated as they took care of my injuries and deprogrammed my brain, so I could re-enter society. After this process was done, they had me testify against my father to support the state's case. The only charge that stuck was child abuse. He was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison, the maximum possible sentence. I never saw my mother after that day. I have no idea what happened to her. It's been 2 decades. I went through the foster care system. I found a pair of good parents willing to work with my sensitive past. I graduated high school, went to college, and even got a degree, but it's all been tainted. I can never escape my past. My missing eye is a constant reminder of who I am, where I came from, and how I'll never be able to escape into anonymity. I will always be the boy whose cult leader father took his eye, and there are the visions as well. Doctors said it was a form of PTSD, but I'm not so sure. At first, I would only see them out of the corner of my eyes. Dark shadows like the ones that appeared when Maya was taken. They would flit away if I ever tried to look at them properly. Sometimes I can feel the gaze of their many eyes even before I see their presence. I've ignored it for years, but recently they have become bolder. Just the other day, I saw one standing in a crowd as I waited in line to buy a coffee. It didn't run when I looked at it. It just watched me, standing in the middle of the sidewalk, eyes blinking, mouths open, like it was waiting for something. The doctors keep prescribing pills, but they don't work. My father did something more to me in that cave than just take my eye. I worry it's going to kill me. I've been going deep, looking for any possible solution, no matter how crazy, to figure out how to stop this. I got an email yesterday. It was from B, or someone who claimed to be him. I hadn't seen or heard from him since the day I first entered the tower. I didn't even know he was still alive. The email said he wants to meet me tomorrow. He says there are things we need to talk about. I get emails like this sometimes, and normally put them right in the trash. But he said something that made me stop before I pressed a button. I was right about the word on the wall. It's a name. I know about your visions. Come see me, and I'll tell you how to stop them. Whoever sent this to me, I'm meeting them tomorrow. I hope they have some answers. Story 7. The benefits of owning a limestone sink. The sink needs to be cleaned twice a day. I stared at the underlined text. Surely that can't be right. A sink needs to be cleaned once per shift, just after I finish the dishes. My eyes glance at the nanny cam placed in the corner of the kitchen. I reason that it's easier to just get on with it. This isn't my first unusual request from a client, and it'll only take a few minutes to get it over with. I'll clean it at the start of my shift, and do it again before I leave. The marigolds had already left when I arrived to clean the house, and I've already made a mental list of each task to complete it before the day's end. So, it's just me in the sink for now. It's cold to the touch, with a slight grit to its texture. It is a beautiful sink, a slight warm tone to it and a marble effect throughout. It seems sturdy and expensive. On the side of the basin, next to the taps, is a whole lemon, a tub of fine salt, and a sharp kitchen knife. It doesn't take a genius to figure out that the marigolds want their sink clean with these items. And so, I slice the lemon into halves and dip the exposed face into the salt tub. I use the lemon as you would a sponge, making gentle circular motions, stopping occasionally to re-dip when the salt dissolves. The process takes around 5 minutes, and I get a courtesy rinse with water when I'm done. I step back and look down at the sink, satisfied with its state, and move on to the next task. I've just finished the final load of laundry when it reaches 5. My body aches from the day's work, and I'm eager to get home and relax. I have one arm in the sleeve of my jacket when I realize I haven't cleaned the sink again. I suppress my groan and head back to the kitchen. The other half of the lemon is still perched next to the sink, so I grab it, dip its face into the salt, and start scrubbing the sink. My arms are burning, tense from hours of manual labor. I can feel the nape of my neck getting moist, but I keep scrubbing. 5 minutes pass, I rinse, I leave. The sink needs to be cleaned twice a day. The marigolds are gone again, and I'm scrubbing the sink. The lemon is softer today, making it hard to keep a good grip on the fruit. When I arrived this morning, the sink had acquired some extra stains near the plug. It's a large brown sticky stain, which I can only assume is barbecue sauce. It feels like the stain is taunting me, refusing to lift, determined to stay and ruin the pristine sink. But I'm resilient and I keep scrubbing. Eventually it yields to me, and I can finally rinse and walk away. My eyes dart at the clock. 20 minutes have passed. That a sizable chunk of my shift being occupied to this wretched sink. I'll just have to put the laundry on a quick wash. It's with dread that I remember the sink just as it hits 5. My shoulder has started to pulse as I begin the relentless scrubbing. I'm trying to ignore it when a sudden sharp pang shoots through my blade and into my neck, causing my hand to twitch and scrape along the side of the basin. I hiss and pull my hand up to examine the damage. My skin has caught against the grit of the skin and torn open in 3 small wounds. Anger, mixed with pain, begins to simmer in my bones as I notice my blood has tarnished the pristine side of the sink. I have to start cleaning again. The sink needs to be cleaned twice a day. My fingers grip the sides of the steering wheel, the nails almost piercing to the leather as I sit outside the Marigold's home. I know what awaits me beyond the doors, and I can't stand it. I was thinking about that stupid sink all night, and how long it took me to rectify the new stains I had left on it. I got home late, grouchy and in pain, and it just starts all over again. The sink jeers at me as I walk into the house, practically screaming at me to clean it again. It seems grittier today. More minuscule stones break off and leave tiny holes that I must clean. I researched types of sinks last night and can now identify this horrid thing as limestone. I can just imagine the smug look on the Marigold's faces when they threw money into this useless aesthetic. It's one of a kind. It has a natural elegance. You must be a certain type of freak to want a sink made of stone. When did porcelain go out of fashion? My fingers are stinging from the lemon juice and salt seeping into the paper cuts left by the grit. My eyes water, but I refuse to let this sink see me cry. I feel like I'm losing my mind, but with every passing day the sink seems to get wider and wider, as if I'm eroding it piece by piece each time I clean it. I lose half the day scrubbing back and forth until it finally becomes clean. The sink needs to be cleaned twice a day. I can't stop thinking about this fucking sink. This relentless Sisyphean fucking sink. I've been here for hours, cleaning up a never-ending flow of crimson from my hands. I can close my eyes and see circles. The sink needs to be cleaned twice a day. The sink needs to be cleaned twice a day. Do the Marigolds even exist? Do they even care about the cleaner who spends half their life scrubbing at this unforgiving monster? I can't remember how long I've been here. The sink needs to be cleaned twice a day. At what point does it stop being a sink? My fingers can almost touch the wooden support holding this fucking thing up. I'm numb to the stings of the lemon at this stage, and I'm scared to stop scrubbing. My wounds are openly weeping against the stone, mixing with the lemon, and creating a rouge paste that I smear in circular motions. The acid from the lemon has stopped stinging my wounds. I don't feel anything anymore. The sink needs to be clean. Story 8. We took the wrong path on the Appalachian Trail. The silence was the first wrong thing. It was the 3rd day of our 5-day hike through the most remote section of the Appalachian Trail I'd ever seen. The plan was simple, the kind of simplicity city dwellers like us craved. Disconnect, breathe the pine-scented air, and forget the pixelated hellscape of our daily lives. There were 4 of us. Leo, my brother, with his meticulously researched gear and laminated maps. Ben, his best friend, a bear of a man with a laugh that echoed through valleys. Sarah, my girlfriend, whose quiet strength was the anchor of our group. And me, the amateur just trying to keep up. We'd been laughing that morning. Ben was complaining about the weight of his pack. Leo was correcting his posture for the 10th time. And Sarah was pointing out the way the light filtered through the canopy, painting everything in shades of emerald and gold. It was perfect. That's what made the transition so insidious. There was no crack of thunder, no sudden chill, just a slow, steady draining of sound. The birds stopped singing first. I didn't notice until they were already gone. Then the constant, whispering rustle of the wind through the leaves stilled. The buzz of insects vanished. It was as if someone had thrown a soundproof blanket over the world. We walked for another 20 minutes in that eerie quiet before Leo finally stopped, holding up a hand. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. "Hear what?" Ben boomed, his voice obscenely loud in the hush. "That's the point, dude. There's nothing to hear. It's just a quiet spot," Sarah said, but her voice was tight, and her eyes scanned the dense undergrowth. "It happens." Leo unfolded his map, his brow furrowed. "According to the topography, we should be paralleling a stream. We should be able to hear it. We listened. Nothing. We must have missed a switchback," Leo muttered, more to himself than to us. He traced a line on the plastic-coated paper with his finger. "We'll just cut down this slope here. We'll hit the stream and rejoin the trail." It was the first compromise. The trail was safety. It was known, marked, traveled. Leaving it felt like a transgression. But Leo was our guide, our human GPS. We trusted him. The slope was steeper than it looked, a tangle of exposed roots and loose shale that slid under our boots. The trees grew closer together here, their branches intertwining like bony fingers, blocking out the sun. The air grew thick and cool, smelling of damp earth and something else, something faintly sweet and rotten. That's when we saw the path. It wasn't a game trail. It was too wide, too deliberate. It cut through the forest at a slight incline, its floor packed hard and bare of leaves, as if swept clean. It felt older than the main trail, primal. "This isn't on the map," Leo said, a note of excitement in his voice now. The puzzlement replaced by discovery. This could be an old logging road, a native path even. "Let's not," Ben said, his usual bravado gone. "This place gives me the creeps. Let's just find the stream and get back to the real trail." "This will lead to water," Leo insisted. "Paths always follow water. It's more direct." I looked at Sarah. She gave a slight, almost imperceptible shake of her head, but we were already off course, and the idea of backtracking up that treacherous slope was worse than following the strange, clear path. So we took it, the wrong path. The silence deepened, becoming a physical pressure on my eardrums. The only sounds were the crunch of our boots on the hard-packed earth and the ragged rhythm of our own breathing. The trees lining the path began to change. The healthy oaks and pines gave way to gnarled, twisted hemlocks, their branches draped in witches' beard moss that hung like tattered gravecloths. The light took on a sickly, greenish cast. After another hour of walking, the path opened into a small clearing, and in the center of the clearing was a tree. It was a massive, ancient sycamore, its bark peeling in great white sheets. And from its lowest, thickest branch, something dangled. It was a bundle of sticks and feathers, bound together with what looked like dried sinew. Animal bones, some small like a squirrel's, others larger, longer, were woven into the structure. It was a crude, ugly thing, and it spun slowly in the dead air as if someone had just pushed it. "What the hell is that?" Ben whispered. "Some kind of folk art," Leo said, but his voice lacked its usual authority. He moved closer, pulling out his phone to take a picture. The locals must. His phone screen was a spiderweb of fractured color. He cursed, jabbing at the power button. "It's dead." My battery was full. Ben checked his. Mine, too. A cold knot tightened in my stomach. I pulled out my own device. Black screen. Sarah's was the same. All of them, drained in an instant. We were truly cut off. "We need to go back. Now!" Sarah said. Her voice was low, final. We all agreed. We turned to retrace our steps, a new, frantic energy pushing us. We walked for what felt like an hour, our pace quickening to a near jog. The twisted hemlocks, the sickly light, the oppressive silence. It all looked the same. And then we saw it, the sycamore tree, the bundle of sticks and bones, still turning lazily. We had walked in a perfect circle. Panic, cold and sharp, began to pierce the numbness of our shock. We tried again, this time marking trees with a knife, heading in what we were sure was the opposite direction. The forest seemed to swallow our marks, the path shifting and turning back on itself. Every time, no matter which way we went, we ended up back at the clearing with the sycamore. The sun was beginning to dip below the ridge, plunging the hollow into a deep, premature twilight. The greenish light faded to a murky gray. We were exhausted, terrified, and lost. We'll make camp here, Leo said, his voice hollow. We have no choice. We'll build a big fire. In the morning, with the light, we'll find our way out. It was a desperate plan, but it was all we had. We set up our tents in a tight circle, our movements jerky and silent. As Ben gathered firewood from the edge of the clearing, he let out a sharp cry. Guys, over here. He was standing near a large rock, half hidden by ferns. At its base was a pile of stones, stacked deliberately into a cairn, and nestled among the stones was a leather-bound journal. The cover was stiff with damp and age. Leo opened it carefully. The pages were filled with a tight, frantic script. The first entry was dated 3 years prior. August 12th. Rained all day. Made poor time. Saw a strange path off the main trail. Decided to explore tomorrow. The entries chronicled a solo hiker, a man named Alex, who had found the same path we had. His words started normally, then began to curdle. August 13th. I can't find the main trail. The path keeps bringing me back to this tree. There's a thing hanging from it. It smells like rotten honey. I heard something last night. A sound like rocks grinding together. August 14th. It's watching me. I can feel in the trees. It mimics sounds. Last night, it used my mother's voice, calling my name from the dark. It's trying to learn. My electronics are dead. I am writing this by firelight. I am so cold. August 15th. I saw it today. Just a glimpse. It was tall, too tall. Skin like bleach bark. Its joints bent the wrong way. It was behind a tree and it tilted its head, and its face it had no eyes. Just smooth, blank skin. It made that sound. The grinding. I think it's laughing. The final entry was a single sentence, scrawled across the page in a hand that was barely legible. It doesn't need to eat. It just likes to keep things. Leo closed the journal. His face was ashen. None of us spoke. The theory was now a terrible, confirmed reality. We were not just lost. We were prey. Darkness fell absolute and suffocating. We got a fire going. The flames our only defense against the deepening night. We huddled around it, our backs to the heat, staring out into the impenetrable blackness between the trees. We didn't speak. We just listened. For a long time, there was only the crackle of the fire and the hammering of our own hearts. Then it came. Crunch. A footstep. Just outside the ring of firelight. Heavy. Deliberate. We froze. Ben gripped his hiking axe. Leo held a burning branch like a torch. Hello. Leo called out, his voice trembling. Silence. Then, from the darkness to our left, a voice. It was Ben's voice. A perfect imitation. Hello? It called back, but the tone was all wrong. It was flat, curious, and utterly devoid of warmth. Ben gasped, his face a mask of horror. It's okay, the thing in the woods said, now using Sarah's voice. Come out here. I'm scared. Sarah clutched my arm, her nails digging into my skin. Stop it. I screamed into the darkness. A moment of silence, then the sound of grinding rocks. It was a low, guttural, chittering sound. It was learning and it was amused. The rest of the night was a slow descent into hell. It circled us, never showing itself, playing a horrific game of mimicry. It used Leo's voice to try and lure Ben away. It used my voice to beg Sarah for help. It was probing us, learning our fears, our relationships, our vulnerabilities. We held our ground, clinging to each other, our sanity fraying into raw nerve endings. Dawn came, not with a glorious sunrise, but with a feeble, gray light that did nothing to lift the gloom. We were hollow-eyed and trembling. The fire was embers, and that's when we saw him. Sitting with his back against a sycamore tree was a man. He was dressed in faded hiking gear, covered in a fine layer of moss and lichen. His skin was waxy and pale. His head was tilted back, and his mouth was open in a silent scream. It was Alex, the author of the journal. He had been there the whole time, preserved like a grotesque trophy. His eyes were gone, and in the sockets small, pale mushrooms grew. The sight broke the last of our resistance. We ran. We didn't care about direction, about the path, about anything except getting away from that clearing. We crashed through the undergrowth, branches whipping at our faces, fueled by pure animal terror. We ran until our lungs burned and our legs gave out, collapsing in a heap by a familiar-looking stand of birch trees. We were once again completely lost, but we were away from that thing, away from the clearing and its grisly guardian. It was Sarah who found it 2 days later. We were stumbling, dehydrated, and delirious, following the course of a stream we'd finally stumbled upon, praying it would lead to civilization. She stopped, pointing a shaking finger at a tree. Carved into the bark, fresh and raw, was a single symbol. It wasn't one of our marks. It was a crude stick figure of a man with 2 long limbs and a smooth, blank circle for a head. It was him, the thing from the clearing. It wasn't just keeping us in its territory. It was marking us, claiming us. We did eventually find a road. A park ranger found us half dead from exposure and brought us to safety. We gave a garbled story about getting lost, about animal attacks. They nodded, gave us water and blankets, and wrote it off as a tragic hiking accident. We never told them the truth. They wouldn't have believed us. We're back in the city now. The lights and noise are a constant, welcome assault. But I can still feel the silence of that hollow, waiting. Leo hasn't spoken a word since we got back. Ben jumps at every sound. Sarah sleeps with the lights on. And last night, I was taking out the trash. The alley behind my apartment was dark and quiet. And from the deep shadow between 2 dumpsters, I heard it. A soft, familiar sound. It was a gentle, grinding chitter rocks. It's not that we escaped. I understand that now. The journal was wrong. It doesn't just like to keep things in its hollow. Sometimes, it likes to let them run. Story 9. Has anyone else ever played Ouija Board Simulator? About a month ago, I downloaded a game called Ouija Board Simulator from the Steam store, and weird things have been happening ever since. I only played it twice, once with my girlfriend and once on my own. It has completely disappeared from my computer. It's no longer listed on any digital storefront, and I can't find any evidence of it ever existing online. I've always been extremely superstitious about Ouija boards specifically. I was raised Catholic, so anything concerning the occult has always unnerved me. Don't get me wrong, I'm not some Bible thumper who thinks that playing with a Ouija board is a one-way ticket to demonic possession or eternal damnation or anything crazy like that. I've just always held the belief that there's a lot about the universe we don't understand, and it's not worth knocking on any door that might have something malicious on the other side. My girlfriend doesn't have any of that baggage, and every time spooky season comes around, she asks if I'll do the Ouija board with her. She teased me the first time I told her why I didn't want to, and it's become a yearly tradition for her to ask me again ever since. She was never pushy or pried too much about it, and she always respected my wishes that if she was going to play around with that kind of stuff, she didn't do it in our apartment. So yeah, I was just browsing the Steam store looking for cheap horror games to play this year when I came across Ouija Board Simulator. The game was only $6.66. I thought that was a cute touch, and the screenshots looked pretty cool. I figured this would be a fun middle ground for my girlfriend and I, an opportunity to share an experience with her that I wouldn't otherwise participate in. with a degree of separation that I would be comfortable with. I bought the game and surprised her with it after work that night. The game itself was honestly pretty neat. It had a sort of low-poly N64 game aesthetic. To call it a game is a bit of a stretch, actually. Like the name implied, it was a pretty straightforward simulation. Upon booting it up, we were met with a very simple sight. It was first person, with a pair of polygonal forearms stretching out into view, resting on a circular table with a rectangular Ouija board texture. In the middle of it, we could look around by moving the mouse, but the room around the table was so dark that we could barely even make out the corners of it. It was really hard to see, but we could tell by the look of the walls and the counter in the background that we were in a small kitchen. A stumpy red candle sat ahead of the Ouija board, illuminating the scene before us in a dim orange glow. An NPC sat across the table from us. It was a super basic model. No facial features or clothing textures. Like a three-dimensional stick figure with blocky proportions. After a few seconds, it held out its hands and placed a little triangle with a hole in it on the middle of the board. My girlfriend told me it was called a planchette. A prompt appeared on screen. WASD, left hand. Up arrow, down arrow, left arrow, right hand. My girlfriend hasn't played many computer games, so I offered a man the keyboard while she used the mouse to look around. I got a feel for using the keys as the NPC placed its hands on the little planchette. I moved our hands to it as well, and a little animation kicked in which placed our character's hands on the other end of the planchette. My girlfriend instructed me to move the thing around in a circle 3 times, which I did, and a new prompt popped up on screen. Asked a question. We looked at each other, confused. I tried typing hello on the keyboard, but nothing happened. Tried moving our character's arms around, but the planchette just snapped right back to the center of the board, our index and pointer fingers still attached to it. Can you hear us? My girlfriend's voice made me jump out of my chair. I wasn't expecting it, and though my microphone had been on the whole time, I hadn't even considered it would work that way. Sure enough, the digital planchette started to glide across the board. Both our hands and those of the NPC were still glued to it, but I hadn't pressed any keys to move it. The little circle hovered over the word. Yes, my girlfriend and I shared a nervous giggle. Are there any spirits here? She asked, a slight trepidation in her voice. The planchette slid to the center of the board, then right back onto yes. A chill rushed down my spine. I immediately felt silly about it. My girlfriend nudged me. Go ahead, ask it something. Getting put on the spot, like that made my fear melt away a bit. Briefly, I saw the situation for what it was. My girlfriend and I huddled together over the monitor in our office with the lights off, like a couple of middle schoolers discovering Silent Hill for the first time. How are you doing today? I asked. The game thought for a second, then the planchette started sliding across the letters on the board, stopping briefly at a few of them to spell out SPLENDID. Another chill down my spine. I guess I didn't expect something so formal. Well, that's good, I said. An urge to break the tension bubbled up from my gut. You come here often? The planchette whipped over to yes. I'm not ashamed to say my heart started racing. I mean, the whole point of playing was to get scared. I watch a good amount of horror movies. I'm no lightweight. But yeah, I was starting to wig out a bit. There was no sound coming from the game. No sound of the wind, no ambient music, nothing. Just a low hum of my PC and the heart beating out of my chest. Do you want to be done? I asked my girlfriend. She nodded at the screen, and I saw the planchette slide over to, and oh, she was having a laugh at the whole thing. And I know I probably should have been too, but I was just getting more and more scared by the minute. Keep going, she prodded. I racked my brain for anything else to say. When did you pass away? I asked. ILIVE. The flame of our digital candle flickered. My girlfriend made us look around, only to find the dark corners empty still. I saw the NPC shift in its chair as soon as she moved our gaze away from it. I could have sworn I felt a breeze in the room. The fans on my computer started to whir louder. I immediately thought it was odd. I don't have the best rig known to man, but it certainly should have been able to run a game that looked this primitive no problem. The download size was relatively small, so unless this thing was taking an insane amount of processing power to field our questions, I really couldn't see how it would cause anything to overheat. How are you answering our questions? I asked. The planchette danced around the board. Pardon. Are you AI? Do you have a finite number of responses? Again, the planchette spelled. ILIVE. I was shitting bricks, but playing it off pretty well. At least I was, until I asked a question that I wish I never had. What's your name? The planchette started to move around once more, spelling out the last straw, DAVID. And with that, our digital candle went out. We could still see the Ouija board in front of us. Just barely. In its absence, artificial moonlight revealed a window on one of the walls. The NPC was trembling ferociously. Okay, Kay, I said as I nonchalantly closed out the game. My girlfriend burst out laughing. Oh my God, you were actually scared, she giggled. Yeah, I guess I was. How did it know your name? That's so creepy. Good fucking question. My Steam profile probably. Or maybe this thing is spyware, and it pulled it off of my fucking tax receipts or something. The mood lightened up, and we shared a laugh. You sure you don't want to boot it back up? She asked. You're supposed to say goodbye. I yawned and stretched and checked my phone. Yeah, I'm good. That night, I dreamt of the game. I was sitting in the kitchen, at the table with the Ouija board, but with no NPC sitting on the other end. I noticed the candle was on my side. I was in its seat. My surroundings didn't exactly look real, but they didn't look like the graphics of the game either. There was a sort of blurry sheen on everything around me, sort of like the aliasing you see around the edges of low-resolution textures. Even so, I was able to make out my surroundings a lot better than before. The floor beneath my feet was a black and white checkered ceramic tile. Through the small window, leafless branches stretched into the night. The chair I was sitting in matched the table, both made of finely finished wood with little floral designs etched into the edges. The walls and corners were still pretty hard to make out. The details were blurry, but in the shadows I saw shapes that formed out cabinets, a stove and fridge, and so on. Everything looked old, like a kitchen from the 60s or 70s. Most importantly, now that I was physically in the space, able to see things a bit more clearly, I picked up on something that we didn't notice while playing the game. The layout was identical to our kitchen in real life. I looked down at the Ouija board. No planchette in sight. I tried to leave my seat, but I could not stand. I felt a pair of eyes on me, and when I looked back in the far corner of the room, I saw a tall silhouette that hadn't been there a second earlier. It spoke to me. Its voice crunched and compressed like it was coming to the dying speakers on those crappy old LCD games you get in Happy Meals as a kid. I don't remember what it said, but it sounded really excited. I woke up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat. My girlfriend slept soundly next to me. I laid back down and didn't think about it until days later. After about a week, I started to notice weird stuff happening around the apartment. Little things at first. Slight chills. Doors randomly opening and closing. I'd swear I put a plate in the dishwasher just to find it right back on the counter an hour later. At first, I thought I was just imagining things, but when I came home one day to find our front door standing completely open, I couldn't ignore it anymore. My girlfriend went to a bar with some friends that night, and I booted up the game again while she was gone. It was exactly how I had left it for the most part, though the NPC was nowhere to be found. The planchette sat in the middle of the board. I guided my character's hand to it, moved it to the hello position, and took my hands fully off the keyboard. I sat there for a few minutes, beads of sweat forming on my forehead while the pixels burned into my eyes. Nothing happened. I tried rebooting the game and was met with an error message. I scoffed. Was I seriously losing sleep over some shovelware that can't even boot up properly? I started to feel really stupid. I told myself I was imagining things, letting some stupid bullshit get the better of my nerves. I almost uninstalled the game, but thought even that would be an admission of mental defeat. I just turned the computer off and left the office. Things got significantly worse after that. For starters, I had another dream where I was in the game that night. I woke up at that kitchen table. The room around me still blurry. I tried to scream but couldn't get a sound out. All of a sudden, I felt a stabbing pain on one of my calves and looked down to see a featureless figure crouched beneath the table. I would have leapt out of my seat, if I wasn't glued to it. Its empty face shot up to look back at me, the fuzzy outline of its humanoid head dancing in the false moonlight. I screamed myself awake. My girlfriend barely stirred in her sleep as I hobbled to the bathroom. Sweat stung the fresh cut on my leg. It was thin and almost a foot long, trailing up my calf like someone had scraped the skin off with their fingernail. I got home the next night to find that my apartment was completely out of power. I tried flipping the breakers. No way to get it back on. I called the DWP, and they said they wouldn't be able to send a technician out until the next day. I pleaded with a guy on the phone, but there was nothing they could do, and the sun was starting to set. I decided to get a hotel room nearby, and went about packing my things. The apartment had already been giving off so much creepy energy, and it got even worse as I frantically packed my go bag by flashlight. I got all my clothes and toiletries together, then went into the office to grab a phone charger and found my computer still running. At that point, I had to tell my girlfriend what I thought was happening. She just about laughed me out of the room when I did. She asked if I was making the power outage up, and if that's why we were staying at a hotel. I insisted that I was being genuine, and her demeanor became incredibly somber. She told me that she didn't feel anything odd about our place, which I thought was completely unfair, because she had barely even been home in the past month. Our talk became a fight, and she left to sleep at home that night. I begged her not to. I thought about camping in my car outside the building to make sure she would be okay. But being away from that apartment was my first chance to get a good night's sleep in over a week. It's not like I can afford to be spending every night in a hotel, so I decided to take the opportunity while I had it. I didn't end up sleeping much anyway. My mind just kept racing. The more I thought about it, the more it didn't add up that the game used my name like that. I mean, it could have easily been a coincidence. David is a pretty common name, and also a biblical one, and everyone calls me Dave. Even my Steam account is under Dave, not David. We had played the game on a PC that I usually only ever use for gaming, and after scrubbing through all my locally saved files, I couldn't find a single document or anything that had my name on it as David. The city got someone out to inspect our apartment the day after that. Service guy said there must have been a mistake, because there wasn't any sign of the breakers getting shorted or anything. It appeared to be an intentional shutoff. He apologized, and they get our service back on ASAP. My girlfriend and I got power back later that night, but our relationship hasn't been the same since. She just won't believe me. Straight up, no matter how much I try to tell her, show her videos of evidence and appeal to her emotions, she won't even entertain the idea. I broke down in tears many times trying to plead with her, and every night I slept out on the couch surrounded by shadows. I haven't had another dream about the game, but as I said at the start of this post, Ouija board simulator has completely vanished. I plugged my computer back in after a particularly bad day about a week ago. I had yanked the cord out of the wall before leaving the hotel, and hadn't stepped foot back into the office since. I honestly don't fully know what my intentions were, if I was going to play it again to try to find some answers or just uninstall it once and for all. But either way, when I went in my games folder, it was gone. I checked my download history, my Steam library. No sign of the game anywhere. I tried calling Steam's customer service, but they were no help at all. I've searched the internet high and low, but every Ouija or which board game I've found has been different from the one I played. I don't remember the name of the developer or publisher from when I first bought it, and when I checked my credit card history, there wasn't even a charge for it. I know how corny this sounds, but it's like the game never even existed. The weirdest part, the part that genuinely broke me, is that my girlfriend won't acknowledge the game either. When I brought up Ouija board simulator that night in the hotel room, she looked at me like I was crazy. At first I thought she was in denial or something, but the more I prodded her about the game specifically, the more she insisted that she had no idea what I was talking about. That's truly why the fights got so bad. Not only because she wouldn't believe that our place was haunted, but because she became outright hostile whenever I even mentioned what caused it. I moved out of our apartment today. I don't know if we're officially broken up, but she definitely doesn't seem interested in talking to me whatsoever. I'm surprised I even got her to agree to be there while I moved my stuff out. She barely said a word as I went about dismantling our home, stripping away all the belongings to my name that I felt comfortable leaving her without. I tried to talk to her a couple times, but it fell on deaf ears. She shut herself up in the bedroom while I packed everything up and only ever came out when it was finally time for me to leave. Even then, she only spoke to me after I refused to give her the keys until she did. I'll never forget what she said to me, and not because of how devastatingly brief and cruel it was. Not because after almost a decade of love and loyalty, she sent me out the door with little more than a few heartbreaking sentences. Not because her last words to me were used to call me crazy, or because as harsh as those words were, the look in her eyes betrayed them. I'll never forget it, because in the entire time that I've known her, it was the first time she ever called me by my full name. It was the first time she ever called me David. Story 10. I regret taking my dog out at 1 a.m. Waiting until 1 a.m. to take my dog out to pee has to be one of my worst habits. After what happened last night, I'll never take her out that late again. The walk was fine, almost peaceful, but when we got back inside, it was strange. The lobby felt heavy, like we weren't the only ones there. I've been staying in my grandma's condo, and almost everyone here is older than 70, so they're all asleep. They love to chat during the day. So at night, I appreciate the silence. Maybe that's why I waited to take her out. I love having the world to myself. We make our way to the elevator. "Third floor, please," I mumbled to myself, showing how tired I really was. The doors close, but we don't move. We just sat there, colder than it should have been, but I didn't think anything of it. Eventually the door opens back up. I look out into the lobby, but I don't see anyone. I press the button again, and the doors close for the second time. We wait. Eventually it slowly starts moving up. As we pass the second floor, me and Lucy both start slowly walking to the front of the elevator. It's about 5 seconds to each floor, so we take 5 little footsteps to the doors. But the elevator keeps moving. We pass the 3rd floor, then the 4th. I press button 5, so we don't go all the way to the top, and it opened. A dimly lit lobby waits outside the elevator, almost identical to my lobby, but a giant 5 reminds me I'm on the wrong floor. They have the same nature painting we had, same carpet. Nothing seemed off, until the doors started to close. That's when I saw it, a tall figure hiding in the corner, so tall that he hunched over to avoid touching the ceiling. He looked excited, like I caught him waiting to pop out and yell surprise. His shoulders tucked into his neck as his balled-up fists coiled against him with excitement. I couldn't see his eyes. They were hidden in shadow, but his smile looked tired, like he'd been holding it like that for hours. I feel Lucy staring at him too. Neither of us can move. Eventually the door closed. I press the 3 button for the 3rd time and try to pass that off as my imagination. It's late, I'm exhausted. The elevator finally starts moving down. Just as I started to doubt it'd open at my floor, it does. I breathe a sigh of relief. The nightmare is over. As I take my first step forward, the elevator door slams closed. So loud it had to wake someone up. Doors slowly open back up. I take another step forward and boom, it slammed closed again. It's like a mouse trap. Luckily, Lucy didn't try to run out. We're so close. How are we going to get out of here? This time the doors never open back up. The lights dim. I'm too frozen to push any more buttons. I didn't need to. All of a sudden the 6th button lit up as if it were pressed. Then it turned off. Then on and off. It repeated that. It would flash, 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 and then rest. Flash, 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 then rest. I felt Lucy watching the flashes. 666. The elevator started to move slowly downwards. The red glow from the button illuminates the elevator walls, still flashing as we sank. 666. The swirls of the wooden panels start to look like distorted eyes, watching us sink. We pass the 4th floor, my 3rd floor, and the rest. Still flashing. 666. It felt like we lowered forever. Eventually we stopped. The door slowly slid open. A familiar lobby greeted us. A giant 3 suggested we were back on the 3rd floor, despite traveling downwards for minutes. I took a test step forward to make sure we weren't going to get sandwiched by those massive steel doors. They stayed open. I took the end of Lucy's leash and tossed the handle through the doorway. It didn't close. We sprint out of the elevator. We probably ran faster than most Olympians. I turned left to enter our wing, but the floor feels off, slightly tiled to the right. At first I thought it was my imagination, but I watched Lucy bump into walls, which she never does. The floor feels spongy, like they were just washed, but it's way too late for that. The hallway doesn't seem to end. Like walking through the hallway in Peach's castle in Mario 64. It feels like it goes on forever. As I was turning my key, something caught the corner of my eye. I thought it was a balloon up against the ceiling until it pulled away around the corner. I'd been so focused on the floor that I didn't realize I was being watched. The key wouldn't fit into the lock. Did the lock shrink? Is this my door? Somehow it slid its way in and we made our way inside. I'll never take her out this late again. We go to bed. As I'm laying in bed, I almost convinced myself this was all a wild dream. I've been watching too many movies. I could fall asleep right now if Lucy wasn't breathing on my face. I wanted to push her off of me, but then I heard her yelp in the room. Before I can open my eyes, I hear a faint voice whisper, "Serpazzi."